Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us for this session. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to explain and present largely our research on a very interesting field. We're a business intelligence and data management vendor, but we do a lot of vendor neutral research in terms of emerging trends because that informs our strategy, our development program. And it also helps us move with our customers and prospects in areas that are hot and that are evolving and that drive more revenues and more cost savings. So, with the digitization going on in the world, we got a lot of questions about what are the new emerging business models. And there is a hot buzzword and a hot thing that is known now, and it's called data-driven business models. Write down this word. I'll talk a lot about that. But this is essentially what a lot of companies are doing and trying to figure out. And it's a very important topic. And here I'm going to show you and talk to some models. We started building a research and doing a taxonomy of various data monetization, data-driven business model for data monetization. And we all collect data, we all do things, but we want to know how to make money with it. And so why is the topic became so important? Why are companies looking at it? One caveat before I continue. These are generalized models, so you have to think how you apply them to your business. So we can't tell you, you're the ones, the experts in your area. So we came with, based on what we saw, based on what we talked to customers, prospects, and other vendors, we find the common things. But oops, sorry, I'm running ahead. Anyway, so why is the topic important? About 3 years ago, we were sitting on a round table, and a CEO of a logistic company came and said, why didn't we invent Uber? And he took us to his logistics center and showed us and said, look, we have all the technologies. We have the same screens that you see on Uber. We have everything that tracks the car. We know the exact location of the car. And we have dispatchers that look at the screens and connect the customers with the drivers to pick them up. And he said, my board, once Uber became a hype and a big company, the board came and said, we voted to invest in this technology. Why didn't you invent Uber? You actually missed on a multi-billion-dollar opportunity to do that. And that's a question that's happening in every company pretty much. Companies, we see other companies selling their data to startups only to find out that 3 months later the startup comes and sells them a data-driven business solution and they buy it. And once it goes up to the board goes and says, but why somebody else is doing your work and why is the value migrating to these companies instead of staying with the company? So really, really important questions. We see more IT being pressed about that. And so I'll give you the summary of the results. We find that it's largely a mindset that needs to change in the organization. So a lot of these things are cultural, and I'll explain a little bit here. So the first thing, there are 3 things that we need to change in the mindset so that we don't miss on opportunities when we own the data and we own the technology, but we actually don't invent things. So the first one is that you have to manage data as an asset. Okay, I know there's a lot of data is the asset, data is the new crude oil, data is everything, but we largely pay lip service to that. We're not actually doing it, we're not following through. And there is an initiative to put data on the balance sheet of companies. And so once this happens, you're going to really see people managing data as an asset rather than paying lip service to that. Innovating with data. How many people here use data to innovate? Okay, we just read the curious examples in the press. LinkedIn did some interesting analysis, invented the recommendation of friends and stuff, and went from 20 million to 400 million people. That's a data-driven innovation, right? It's a lot going on with the data that you can use to drive innovation, but actually, is it done systematically? No, companies still don't do that. So that's where the startups come. They do it systematically, they build the culture from the ground up to be data-driven, and that's how they grow up and win in the marketplace. So the last thing in the mindset is think about data monetization. And that's important because when you embark on a data warehousing project or any data collection project, nobody is asking how do we make money with it. I have never seen in any of the requirements in my 25 years experience with a data warehouse something that says in the first paragraph of the objectives, we're going to build this to make money with it. It's all about all kinds of other things and noble goals and stuff, But really, the idea that you can make money with data is not there. And so we still keep data as kind of cost projects to create the reporting and after the fact what's happening and etc. So we need to change these three things so that we don't face this dilemma and this question about what's happening after the fact and why somebody else materialized on a big opportunity with the data. So if you think that you're alone in this stuff, this is a university research, Cambridge University research. 100% of the respondents to a survey, very large enterprise global survey, responded that they are facing cultural issues when they try to implement data-driven business models. So everybody agrees that if you go out to your board and you say, look, I'm going to create this data-driven business model and I'm going to make money with this data for you, they're most likely going to look and say, okay, something's wrong with you. Take a vacation. And I can't tell you how many examples. We had a CIO who joined a credit card processing company, a very large one in North America. And he said, you have all the data. Why don't we build a data-driven application so that the small businesses can learn, benchmark, and manage their cash flow better? It's a pure data-driven business application. Luckily enough, he kind of got the approval, and within 3 years, this was generating over 7% of their revenue. So very significant for a billion-dollar company. This is a significant new revenue stream generated by data-driven application. There is 86% agree that there is a value perception. That's again the point that data is, we talk about being an asset, we talk about being a crude oil, but when you talk about making money with it, people go and just kind of say, this is not happening until it happens. And finally, the other big issue is this one, that 70% agree that there is a serious data quality and integrity issues with the data that actually are causing a lot of problems in moving to a data-driven business models. So as you can see, we're still living in the world of physical assets and physical management. So let's see why this is important to start thinking of it and what's happening out of the marketplace. How many of you analyze the competition systematically for the company? Okay, not many people, but we're in the data world. We should be doing that, right? So what's happening is the nature of the competition is changing, and we tend to ignore it. So there are a couple of things that are happening that are very important. First of all, the first mover advantage, it has been known to economists for a while as a rule, is a very serious thing. Companies that move first, they tend to take the lion's share of the market. Okay? That's a very big issue out there. We don't believe in it. Why didn't we believe in it? Because if you are a company that has a lot of physical assets, and I'll give you other examples of that, you believe that the new entrant in the market, it will take them forever to build the same number of physical assets that are required. The example is Ford Motor Company and GM. They never thought that Tesla can scale. But it turns out that Tesla can scale much faster than they were able to scale before. And so when you look at the first mover advantage companies that Uber, they grew up to $1 billion company in 4 years instead of what it used to be 20 years for the physical assets managing companies. So a very big deal in terms of that. In fact, Jeff Bezos published a book very recently and said the book is called First Mover Advantage, just to alert everybody in the industry how important this rule has become. The second one is the winner takes it all effect. So again, we always think that, okay, we want to be naturally fast seconds. That's what retailers call themselves. So I used to go and talk to the Fifth Saks Avenue and these guys. And I say, we don't look at new technology. We want to be fast second. Well, wake up. Amazon didn't leave much room for fast second. That's exactly what everybody realized. Nowadays, that fast second worked in the physical world very well. You can do it. But today, the first mover takes it very quickly, takes 70% of the market share, and practically leaves nothing behind. So these are the two rules. And from an economic effect, so whenever you see a data-driven competition, we tell people you have to think of these effects. How is it going to affect your industry? What is the first mover going to do? And how is the winner take-it-all effect going to play out? So you can play a counter strategy that is tailored to this world. There is another very important characteristics, and these are scale and scope effects. Okay, so we economists look at things: how quickly you scale, how quickly you grab market share, and how quickly you can extend your scope. And the scale thing we already talked about at Uber, Airbnb, all of these guys, they scale very quickly because they're just data driven. But the scope effect, we're just beginning to see it. And that's moving into adjacent and new markets using the same data-driven business models. So the company that did it and kind of everybody went, oh, this is what's happening, is Amazon. They started with selling books. They expanded into selling everything. More interestingly, 3 days ago, they announced that they're buying 20,000 Mercedes trucks to create a logistic operation in the States. So they're moving in the logistic business, scaring the FedEx and the DHLs of the world tremendously. And they're going to move into healthcare, insurance, and other things. And the interesting thing is that they're not applying any different management techniques when they move to selling books to moving trucks. They're applying exactly the same data-driven techniques to get into adjacent markets. So that's scope effect. We're just beginning to see it, and it's scaring everyone because there is no time to react to that. So this is what has changed in the marketplace, very different. And Amazon also went into the grocery business, which is essentially physical assets business, but again, they manage it in a data-driven way. Okay, so let's look at some of the models and the taxonomies. Some of them are well known to you, but again, we wanted to put everything together and show you the variants of them. So the very first one that we encountered, and it's well known, is the data-driven, the assetless model. Own no assets, but have a big market cap. The one that's the best example is Airbnb. They have a larger market cap than Hilton and Marriott together, without owning any asset. So in fact, many economists are now going and saying, well, owning assets is actually becoming a liability. It used to be a competitive advantage, but nowadays it's a liability. So what do we do about that? And how do you react to this? And how can companies think? Is there an opportunity for your business to get into some assetless type of business? We don't know. But we're seeing a lot of variants of this model. So let me show you another one. A variant of that is creating digital assets. So converting physical assets to digital. We saw a couple of years ago the emerging markets for art and digital art and etc. You have Shutterstock for pictures, for logos, for PowerPoint templates. And these are companies that have grown to billions of dollars of valuation. So we first saw digital assets as pictures. We saw the digital books, right? Amazon created the Kindle. We see a lot of digitization of books. But more interestingly, what happened is some clever guy decided that a version of the digital book is the audiobook. And believe it or not, Don Katz spent a lot of time to turn audiobooks into an art form so they can sell a lot. He went after actors and people to find them and record with nice voices. And once it became an art form, it actually sells as many books as physical books are being sold in the United States. So that's a very clever way to digitize the same asset in a different way. My point here is that this model offers endless opportunities about what you can do. Nowadays, we see currencies being digitized, right? I mean, very controversial topic, very big one, but we're seeing it happen. We're seeing ICOs, what used to be the venture capital world of raising money, the private equity firms, now that's being digitized. And loans are being turned into digital assets. So we see a tremendous variation of how people come up with new ideas, how to take physical assets and turn them into digital. I probably think this is one of the best areas and untapped areas in the next 5 years. Another variation that we see, and it's dear to my heart, and that's the one thing that our company does really well, is creating data products. And data products, according to Forbes, actually fall into 3 categories. Data used to benchmark. I already gave you an example of the payer card. They created benchmarking applications that small businesses paid for. Very useful for it. We see a lot of these now in the banking world being created. You have recommendation systems and data used for prediction. So essentially, if you Google data products, you're going to find a lot of information and literature on that. But that means packaging the data and the analytics in a way that the consumer can access it and get just the information needed for decision making. They don't need to know where the information is. They don't need to know what the analytics are. They just need to know and get the answers to their questions so they can make decisions very quickly. So my favorite approach of that is Expedia. Expedia is not a booking application as you all think. Even the inventors of Expedia thought that they're going to build the largest reporting application that is going to allow you to make decisions about your travel plans in less than 6 minutes. The important part with data products is that they take into consideration the decision time frame of the decision maker. So Expedia calculated that if it's going to take you more than 6 minutes to book a flight on average, you're going to go and hire an agent. So they thought it very cleverly. So my point is probably from those of you who deal with data management, BI, and analytics, data products is a very big field to expand on what we do. All right, moving to model 2, it's again data-driven. It's the manless model. So we have a lot of equipment that's going to be operated without any interventions of human beings. So that means a lot of data and a lot of decision automation. About 3 years ago, I was consulting Lockheed Martin on the future of maintenance for military ships. It's a very costly operation. And I said, we have to think about the problem, how we're going to service a ship that's manless 25 years from now. That's exactly how they put it. 25 years from now, all of our military ships are going to be manless. And it's very costly if they're in the Pacific to bring them to the US for services. So we have to figure how we're going to do that out there in the open sea. And I thought 25 years is a long time. And guess what? In March, we have the first military drone ship actually released and in service. So my point here is that the time frame for these models that we thought, oh, this is going to happen in the distant future, it's happening really, really fast. In fact, the same thing is happening with the driverless cars, driverless trucks. Mining equipment is completely manless now, what you can see. So a lot of interesting things are happening in that area. A variant of this is the productless, I call it product as a service model. And that was not a new thing. That was actually invented in '62 by Rolls-Royce. They wanted to sell the plane, the airplane engine powered by the hour. They wanted to sell it as a service. Why is this model emerging? Why is it so important? I'll tell you the history of it now. About 5 years ago, GE noticed that people used to replace industrial equipment in cycles of 7 years. Suddenly, they noticed that nobody was buying any more in 7 years to replace equipment, but was more likely replacing equipment in 10 years. So they wondered what happened, and they discovered that there were clever software companies that plugged sensors in the equipment and said, we're going to optimize the usage of the equipment, and if we extend the life by 3 years, you pay us a percentage based on what would be your replacement cost, right? The savings. So very clever model, and GE immediately realized that their margins are moving to the software providers who offer value-added services on the management and operation of the equipment. So that was the big deal and the big realization for them. And they moved as a product, as a service. And we see now even the car manufacturers going and saying, we don't want to sell you anymore the car, we want to sell you the services of using the car. Very, very different model. A variation of it, again, is the digitization of services. Harvard Business Review conducted research about the preferences of people, whether they want to conduct business with a human operator or with a machine or with a self-service application, a data product. And they found out that 90% of the people prefer to do any kind of a service task themselves. I don't want to book the ticket with the operator. I don't want to change my flight with an operator, calling an operator. I want to do it in an easy-to-use application and change it in minutes. So that is driving a lot of innovation, from chatbots to data products, self-service data products for services, and it can reduce costs significantly. The estimates are about 40% and even higher by doing those things. So again, we're seeing digitization even in the services sector, which is phenomenal. And the final version of the Model 2 is the condition-based maintenance, and that's essentially when you move from operating equipment, you move away from scheduled maintenance. And scheduled maintenance is, if you're running trains or any kind of large equipment, every 2 years or 3 years, you bring the train in the service station, You have a list of parts that you need to replace. Whether they would function longer or not, you don't know, but you're not taking the risk of leaving them there, so you're replacing them. It's a very costly operation. So the idea is now that we can put sensors on everything, and we can, instead of bringing the machine on a scheduled basis, we can bring it near to the point of failure for service. And that extends life. Estimates of companies that do it is between 30 and 80% in terms of savings. You can go to government sites, you can go to the government of Japan and type condition-based maintenance, and you would see that this is the number one priority for them, to keep their train system on time and at a lower cost at the same time. So it's a very important trend. So the third model that we have in mind is the infinite personalization. And this is a very interesting one because it's changing the nature of production. So we're moving from mass production, which was the cornerstone of the modern capitalist system, right? And manufacturing and everything. We're moving to a system of analytical craftsmanship when everything is personalized completely. And so these shoes that I showed you, they're a real example of an analytical craftsmanship because they put sensors and you go on the shoe for 3 days and it analyzes it and it finds the pressure points. So now you are built the perfect shoe. Why does that matter? Why is it such a big issue? To have a perfect shoe that's so well done, is it just comfort? Or is it have a huge economic social effect? And why? We spend about 12 hours a day on our feet. So the amount of damage that goes on the feet, the amount of healthcare money that go for fixing damages on our feet, because our shoes are imperfect and we walk in a strange way since we don't walk barefoot anymore. So it is a tremendous healthcare cost that this analytical craftsmanship actually is helping alleviate. And the point here is that when you move to these data-driven models, the effect is not just isolated to the benefit of the company, to the profit or loss of the individual companies, but the effects spill in society, so the value of them is much higher than actually the individual firm effect. The fourth model, and that's still kind of in the gadget space and it's emerging, this is about, and it's a mouthful of a word, I never can pronounce it, I don't know who came with it, informationalization of products. So here it's again, you have classical physical products. How can you marry a physical product with some digital product so that you can enhance the experience? We're all craving better user experience. And so there is anything from the perfect cocktail maker when the scale electronically hooks up to the device and you can have a library of cocktails and you make the perfect cocktail because everything is done. Cooking books, everything goes through the scales are probably the most optimized. But there are interesting cases. I mean, this is an emerging field. We don't know if it's one of these that is waste of time or it's really enhancing the value. Some people argue that these applications help them learn and do things they've never done. But there are interesting ones like Coors Light, the beer guys. They were obsessed about chilling the beer to the right temperature. So they put a little sensor on the can that tells you, given the weather, the ambient weather temperature, what's the perfect chill temperature to which you have to get the beer. Not a bad idea when you think that people like to taste good things and that people like good experiences. So there is a lot of potential in this field. Less economic benefits, at least for the moment, compared to the perfect shoes. But to me, it's one of the most interesting areas that it's evolving and a lot of new and creative ideas would come in this area. Here I'm moving to a different way of leveraging data to enhance the business. Companies are facing tremendous pressures for growth. And we actually had a customer, the largest perfume manufacturer nowadays in the world, Coty, that 10 years ago decided and said, we want to grow through acquisitions. Say, why do you come to an IT company for that? I say, very simple. We want to make sure that we integrate the systems within 6 months. And if we can't do it in 6 months, we have to pay a regulatory fine and our strategy breaks. So they did. I have 5 minutes? Or? Yeah, okay, that's fine. So they literally went down that path and said, okay, we're going to grow with acquisitions. They developed a strong strategy how to integrate and merge systems and manage the data and the process to do that. And they've grown from $1 billion company to now they're over $15 billion in 10 years. So a phenomenal different kind of using data for growth. I'm coming to the latest, and one of my favorite is blockchain. A lot of it you associate actually with the fact the currencies and bitcoins and all these fancy things that get the negative publicity. But essentially, there is a much bigger economic effect of blockchain. And the one value of it is 25 years ago, there were two Nobel Prizes given on transaction cost economics. And what it said that if you can reduce the cost of transacting between businesses, you can eliminate intermediary institution and reduce the burden of those institutions on society and on the taxpayer. So think about that. The bank is an intermediary. When you go and sell a car to someone else, there is a Bureau of Motor Vehicle that verifies the documents. That's an intermediary. So how can you eliminate that? And blockchain produced a system for costless verification of the transaction. So that allows you two buyers, if I'm selling my car, I don't need now the Bureau of Motor Vehicles to verify any data. So that's what allows us to eliminate certain governmental and private institutions that are intermediaries. A very important fact, so we're seeing asset management moving into it, logistics moving into it, financing moving into it, but it is much more associated and becoming the new ERP system. And if you think, accounting systems we have innovated for nearly about 800 years since the invention of modern entry accounting. So blockchain is the perfect universal general ledger, and it offers a tremendous opportunities for innovation. So I told you in the previous slide about Coty and taking 6 months to merge two companies. If their ledgers are on blockchain, it's going to take them a week to do it. So you have a tremendous speed of transacting and tremendous cost savings, because one of the largest costs in mergers and acquisitions is actually the due diligence. So my final slide is, and that's another way of monetization is, things is companies are bringing their old system up to the standards for data monetization and data-driven business models. And so what we find is that about 50% of the systems in enterprises are dated, and they don't fit into this modernization, into the new paradigm of doing digital business and data-driven business models. So we look at several banks as a clients, and they say we have the old bank and the new bank. They're literally starting to think of the new systems and new architecture for the new bank, the bank of the future, where all the services are going to be essentially digitized. So that's a very important area on a governmental level. We have in the States the Modernization Act that mandates all the government agencies to actually take an inventory of their information systems and determine which one of them have to be modernized. So thank you.